national security. And I look forward to working with my colleagues on this committee so that we can get it passed. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Thanks,
Chairman.
Senator Warren. Senator Fetterman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Well, thank you. It's I hate to have to follow my colleague Senator Warren and talk about crypto because she's, of course, the expert on that. But here into it. So now it turns out that scammers, hackers, and terrorists now have chosen to use crypto. I mean, it's a shock, right? And it makes you wonder why that. Now, do you think the terrorists and those folks are using crypto for the airline's mileage points? Or is it because that it's untraceable and they're engaging in illegal kinds of things? Is that a fair statement?
Yes, Senator.
Yeah. So, and now we have the bank meltdowns and crypto funding from Hamas, and now we have scammers and hackers using crypto to steal people's, money, of course, as well, too. Now, again, directly, Mr. Breaux, can you speak to how people have now praying to these kind of crypto scams? And my real question is like, now, is that redundant to have the term of crypto scam? Is crypto one gigantic scam, really, on that? So, Mr. Breaux?
Yeah, I would say that crypto is the next payment method of choice for scammers. They recognize that your average everyday consumer is probably not familiar with how it works. And yet, as I just mentioned to Senator Warren, the ability to give your cash to buy crypto and send it to a senator is usually to a scammer is usually as close as your closest grocery store. Cryptocurrency, we believe, is for people who want to use it. It's a sophisticated investor who should be looking at cryptocurrency, not my grandmother. That is, and scammers prey on that. They prey on the fact that consumers aren't familiar with how it works, and they use that to defraud them out of billions of dollars and growing.
Well, an investor, and again, to me, it's kind of a paradox too, a crypto investor, because really, I know somebody once said that they wouldn't buy up every cryptocurrency for I think it was a quarter, and really, so why would you invest in crypto for a quarter unless you could sell all of it for 50 cents? Kind of like the greater fool kind of thing. Is that really what underpins it? Or is there any kind of inherent value on that, really, why does it seem to be so open to scam? Is there a connection?
Well, Senator, thank you for the question. Personally, I would never invest in crypto for all the reasons that you just discussed. But for scammers, it's incredibly appealing because it offers what they are after, which is the ability to get their funds quickly, anonymously, and in a way that is practically impossible to reverse, even when the consumer discovers the transaction.
Anonymously, right?
Yes,
so it's
Senator.
untraceable and anonymously. Okay.
If I may, one of the things that when we're talking about crypto and scams is to take into consideration how the money is actually going into crypto first. So we hear a lot of stories that it's actually unauthorized or even fraudulently induced through wire transfer, and then there are no protections for the consumer there. If it was sent through like an electronic funds transfer that's covered by the EFTA, they would have protections, but we've heard of it coming either from HELOC accounts or from wire transfers, and so initially, even that transfer out has no protections for the consumer.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing, because I literally was going to pivot to you for the next question, and that is really about that. And it's like, my staff's much smarter than I am, and I wasn't really aware of this, but they brought it to my attention, is that true bank customers, they're not protected from hackers if they initiate a wire transfer. Right. I mean, that's outrageous. I didn't even know that myself. And, is there a fix for that or anything that you would recommend? Because, again, if I wasn't aware of that, and I'm on the banking committee, so think of how many millions of Americans that aren't aware of this.
Yes, absolutely. We get interviewed all the time, even by Good Morning America, about this very same question. So yes, make it be covered by the Electronic Funds Transfer Act. There was an exclusion when it was originally written in the 70s, and wire transfers were really business to business, and consumers weren't doing it, and it was in person. Now you're doing it online through mobile and digital applications, and so it is in essence an electronic funds transfer now. And even the New York AGs has argued in a suit they filed against Citi that it actually is an electronic funds transfer when it's unauthorized, a request from someone who isn't the consumer to send it somewhere else. So it can be included in the EFTA, and of course, we shouldn't forget, the fraudulently induced transactions. Those should also be included in the EFTA.
So I guess you're saying so that really the banks, I mean, they're the experts and they're the professionals. They should be held accountable, not then a customer that may not have any kinds of idea in that level of what's going on. Is that a fair statement again?
Right. Again, if it was unauthorized and the consumer didn't do it, then yes, they should be reimbursed.
Okay. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Fetterman, for your incisive questions. It's my turn. I think I will be the last questioner. Ms. Sanchez-Adams, like an hour and a half ago, you gave your 6 recommendations. The CFPB, as you know, last year issued a proposed rule that would allow the consumer agency to supervise larger payment apps. What is this? Just walk through, if you would, what this proposed rule means for large payment apps like Venmo and Cash App and Zelle, and the consumers, what it means to consumers who use these platforms. Sort of give us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Yellen. I get to talk to one of the leading experts of the economy here. So now I want to talk about this here. Okay. So now President Biden has now brought down inflation, and now last month over 350,000 new jobs, right?
Yes.
And the economy is growing at 3.3%, right?
Yes.
Okay. Unemployment is now at 3.7%.
Correct.
That's pretty good, right?
And it's the longest stretch under 4% in 50 years.
Yeah. In fact, that was 36 months of job growth, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. And of course, real wages are up too.
Correct.
Yeah. And then now the Dow and the S&P 500 are now at record highs, right?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. So the Dow was over 3,600. And the NASDAQ is almost 16,000. Right? That's those record highs. And is it fair to say that our economies and our economy and the recovery is really the envy of the world?
We're doing better than any other advanced country.
Yeah. So yeah, and actually, when I drove myself back to DC from Pittsburgh this week, I was able to gas up at under $3 a gallon. We're not talking about gas prices anymore. But now I want to now put that is like now some randoms on TikTok put up videos at McDonald's that they can rig a $16 extra meal. So what is really more reflective of our economy right now? Some kind of a TikTok about McDonald's, or with all those other kind of statistics that I've just been discussing over in this question?
Well, all the statistics you mentioned are highly relevant and by and large extremely positive. It is true that the level of some prices that are important to consumers have risen since the pandemic. One of those would be rents. Food prices are somewhat higher, new and used vehicles. But wages have also gone up. And now inflation has moderated very substantially. And in fact, by the measure that the Fed pays the most attention to, inflation over the last 6 months has been running at 2% at an annual rate. And wages are now going up substantially more rapidly.
2%? 2%?
Is the Fed's target.
Oh my gosh, yeah, wow. Yeah.
So prices are not rising rapidly anymore. Wages continue to. The number I tend to cite is that the median worker in the United States can buy the same typical basket of goods as in 2019 and have $1,400 left over to spend or save.
Yeah, and again, it's remarkable that now people want to talk about some random extra meal at McDonald's for $16, which really is a rigged situation. But now anybody, any fair experts would say that our economy is the envy of the world. And now, what's lost in translation in our national conversation about where we are literally, in our economy versus now some of the other discussions in other parts of the media?
Well, I mean, we do see much more positive surveys of consumer sentiment in recent months since inflation has come under control and wages are rising more quickly. When Americans are polled and asked about a recent poll asking them about their own personal financial situation, more than 60% said they felt good, and more than 60% said they thought 2024 would be a better year. Now, sometimes when people are asked about the economy and how other people are doing, they seem more negative on it, but their own assessment of their own situation, as well as their behavior when it comes to spending or starting small businesses, we're seeing really record small business formation, and that's something that only really occurs when people feel confident about the future of the economy.
Thanks, Senator Fetterman. Thank you.
Well, I did give her a shout out, like great job, thank you. Anyway, so I'm out.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. So, as we have today, people with disabilities are sometimes paid pennies an hour. I've said for years that we need to raise our federal minimum and wage. In that, I should be up to at least as a minimum of $15 an hour. Right now, federally, it's now $7.25 an hour. But I really, just to put that in perspective, $15 an hour working full-time, that's $31,000 a year. And that's challenging to live on that. Can you imagine, and there are millions of Americans that are faced having to do on that as well, too. And now the fact is that we have people being paid $1.50 an hour simply because they have a disability, and that's outrageous. And I would like to point out that I have a disability. And with having that disability, I'm not getting paid any less than all of my colleagues here at the table or in the Senate as well, too. And now to discuss my own disability at the moment. Right now, because of after a stroke, now I rely on captioning. That allows me to participate fully as well. And I am going to describe what it is for those that this allows me to participate fully, is that. And now I'm not earning any less money a year for the same job that all my colleagues are as well, too. And I wouldn't want that for me, and I wouldn't want that for anyone on that as well, too. And so as to the point is like, Dr. Avalone, what is the evidence that employers can't afford to pay employees with disabilities a livable, and I want to also emphasize, on a dignified wage?
Well, the truth is if those employers were having any other individual who doesn't have a disability performing that work, they would have to pay at least the federal minimum wage. So from a finance structure, there doesn't make any sense to me in terms of how that can't be worked out.
Well, I mean, so to be clear, so I want people to understand that folks with disabilities are able to be legally allowed to pay less than the federal minimum wage.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, and the minimum wage is $7.25 an hour.
That's correct.
So it's legal to pay less than that, which is already an outrageously low amount of money. So if is that legal to pay someone with a disability, say, $2 an hour? Is that legal?
It is legal to pay somebody less as low as $3.50 an hour, and even less than that, pennies on the hour.
Okay, so what kind of dignity is being paid less than even already shameless low minimum wage? Is there any dignity in that?
No, these are capable and talented workers who can contribute immensely to the workforce, and they should be compensated for their efforts the same as any other American without a disability.
So, and that's the point. It's like I fundamentally believe that there's dignity in every job and in working, but how are you able to really have the dignity if you're legally allowed to be paid pennies on the hour on that, let alone living in at all with without even dignity as well too. And I want the opportunity to just highlight that fact as well. As a member of the disability community myself, I would not want that for myself, and I would now absolutely don't want that for anyone. And I always thought I was empathetic before, but after I developed my own disability, that's made me much, much more empathetic. And now I'm grateful for having my platform to highlight that and to address that, hopefully, in our society as well, too. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Fetterman. Senator Fetterman, welcome. Good to see you. And in the on-deck circle is Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And hello, welcome. There's no reason why you would know this, but I live in Western Pennsylvania, and one of the great things that your organization has done, and that's the Braddock Locks and Dam. Perhaps you might be familiar with that, but the work that the Army Corps has done on the Mon and the Ohio rivers have really put things in motion for another 100 years of commerce in Western PA. And I take every opportunity to praise your organization's work. So, and I'm grateful, so thank you. And now I'm excited to be working with Chair Carper and Ranking Member Capito to ensure that the WRDA bill includes priorities that are critical to Pennsylvania's infrastructure. The first priority I want to ask you today is about acid mine drainage. People may not know the term, but Pennsylvania sees that impact when their rivers might turn bright orange in a very shocking kinds of shade, and often will be fish kills. One watershed in PA, the Tioga River watershed, has water acidic as vinegar. They will be needed the kind of investment of more than $60 million to clean the drainage and to bring back life to that ecosystem. This isn't just in Pennsylvania's problem. There are other states as well that have these kinds of challenges. So, sir, if you had a pre-dedicated program for acid mine drainage, how could the Corps assist communities that need technical and financial help with this problem?
Yes, sir, I'll start. First of all, I want to acknowledge the water quality issues. Our teams are very familiar with that. In the past, we've been using public assistance to states or Section 206 in the CAP program. You run into some funding limits with each one of those, sir, so you are correct. I think a specific authority to actually get after this challenge would greatly enable the Corps to get after the scope of everything you just described.
So would you peg that amount, $60 million? Does that seem... Is that too much, too low, kind of Goldilocks?
Sir, I don't know the value. I know the scope of the problem. I just can't monetize it.
Okay, all right, thank you. I'm also working to ensure the commercial future of the Allegheny River. If we are going to make things happen in West Pennsylvania, we need the Allegheny River to be open for business. Right now, there's a risk for operational hours will be reduced. Along with my colleague and friend Senator Casey, I proposed language to help us find a path forward for Allegheny County to keep lockage levels and service steady until we do. So, Lieutenant General Spellman, you affirmed to my office that you would evaluate the economic impacts before considering a decrease on these service levels. would that evaluation include the long-term harm to current commerce in the region if the lock hours were threatened or reduced?
Yes, sir. You're correct. This is in regard to the 8 locks and dams that we have on the Allegheny River. The economic analysis that I mentioned in the previous hearing, that's based on a 3-year average of both commercial and recreation lockages that we do at each of those 8 facilities. So in other words, we let the commerce dictate the level of service that we have at each one of those locks, not vice versa. So today, Lock and Dam 2 and the C.W. Bill Young Lock and Dam, they're the busiest, and we have 2 10-hour shifts per day passing that traffic. Lock and Dam 4 and 5, a little bit less traffic, so they have 1 10-hour shift. And then locks 6 through 9, those upper 4, much less traffic, and so we operate those by commercial traffic by appointment only. So we will increase that level of service. It's all based on the traffic that we're seeing.
So finally, is it fair to say that you're willing to commit to work with my office to increase utilization and maintain of service?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. And I see the remaining. Back to the chair.
Thanks, Senator Fetterman. Senator Sullivan, I said that you were in the on-deck circle, but we got 2 colleagues who got here earlier today and had to leave, so I have, under the rules, I need to
Thanks, Chairman Holland. Senator Fetterman of Pennsylvania is recognized.
Yes, I love that. All right. So it's great to be here with you today. Now, I don't know, maybe some people in America were talking about a cookie that was $18. And I was alarmed, and I hope we investigate that there is a cookie that costs $18. And do you believe that an anecdote on Twitter about a cookie that cost $18, is that reflective of our economy and where we're at, or not?
I certainly hope not. I don't do much shopping these days, but that sounds like a pretty expensive cookie.
Yeah, and now, and I believe that that the American economy now is the envy of the world after everything right now. Correct?
We are, yes, we're performing very well compared to our peer group.
Yeah, pretty great. And is it fair to say that the stock markets are all up at record highs? Right?
Pretty close.
Yeah, and inflation has been pretty effectively addressed. Right?
It's been coming down sharply since the middle of last year. Yes, we've got a ways to go on that, but we've made a lot of progress.
And corporate profits are pretty robust. Is that fair?
I believe it is.
Okay. Well, we can agree that, and I don't understand why more people seem to be talking about a cookie that cost $18, but that seems to be against the evidence as well. But given that, now, since things are pretty great, and we're in a really great, excuse me one second, place, but now I am concerned, and there's rumors going around that Basel, they're going to change, and they're going to reducing the capital, and I guess I'm concerned about that because I don't know why we would want to, and also I want the record to reflect on you're much smarter than I am. But I would be concerned that things are in a really great place right now. We can all agree on that. I would be concerned to change something like that because I wouldn't want to have something, again, like what happened with SVB. And I just wanted to get your take on that.
Sure. So U.S. banks are well capitalized, and generally speaking, they're quite well capitalized. And we're not talking about reducing current capital levels at all. Really, in the Basel III endgame, capital may well go up. And what we're talking about is whether the proposal that was put out by the bank regulatory agencies, including the Fed, and which has now been the subject of quite a lot of comment, whether, what changes will be appropriate to that. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about reducing existing capital requirements.
Oh, okay. Well, and then I also want to play off of a comment made by my colleague from Tennessee, and I actually agreed with him. And he's concerned about the deficit, about it's $1 trillion for every $100 days. So now, if the federal government had added $3.5 trillion to the deficit by extending the Trump tax cuts, would that increase or decrease inflation?
So I'm going to fall back on our long time reluctance to comment on fiscal policy. We take your fiscal policy decisions, whatever they may be, we take them as they are, and we conduct monetary policy to achieve 2% inflation. But we don't score inflation. CBO does that. They'll make a judgment on that, but it's not something we do because, we're an independent agency, and that requires us to stay the heck out of politics.
So I don't want to put you on the spot, but would those kind of tax cuts, would that help addressing inflation or inflame inflation?
I don't know what the effects would be on inflation. I do know, broadly speaking, we need to get to a place where revenues and spending are better aligned, and I think everybody knows that. And I think we used to talk about this a lot 10 years ago. We're not talking about it so much anymore. That's understandable. The pandemic was a special thing, but I do think it would be great to get back to that on a bipartisan basis.
Okay. Well, I have about 30 seconds left. I just want to go on the record. I think you've done a really great job. And I think our economy, and I do agree that it is the envy of the world as well. And I'm confused that more people are talking about cookies or McDonald's meals and those kinds of a thing. It's not reflective on the strength of this as well, too. And I just want to thank you for your service.
Thank you, sir.
He allowed me to go first, so. Senator Fetterman, please.
Senator Fetterman,
I got time
Pennsylvania is
today.
recognized.
Thank you. Thank you. So, people all across Pennsylvania has been made it very, very clear that we are experiencing a housing crisis. 32% of renters in Center and Pike counties are paying half of their incomes in rent. Rents for the average 1 or 2 bedroom apartments are up to as much of $1,000 a month in Indiana County, $1,200 a month in Montour County, and $2,000 a month in the Lehigh Valley. Franklin County is adding 2,000 jobs, but has no units affordable for these workers. We are short 15,000 units for income people in Pittsburgh region alone. Shelters in Dauphin County are at maximum capacity. Addressing this housing crisis is at a top priority for me, and I'm glad to be here today to discuss possible solutions. I'm proud to introduce with my colleagues the distinguished senator from Wyoming, the very bipartisan Whole Home Repairs Act. And now I want to just talk about the history of that. That was inspired in my own state, spearheaded by Senator Savall, my state senator. And I'd like to point out that Senator Savall represents one of the bluest districts across the nation, technically, as well, too. But that was embraced by his colleagues in the Pennsylvania Senator from as red of any district in Pennsylvania as well, too. So if this can happen in Pennsylvania, I hope that we can have this now nationally as a model. And now we have success stories on that. Mr. Tyler of Hawley, Pennsylvania, 87 years old, and worked as a farmer, as a mechanic and bartender and a deputy sheriff. His roof collapsed and left a hole in the ceiling, and the water leaks and exposure had caused partial rotting of the wall and the ceiling. Wayne County Whole Home Repair Funds were used to make exterior repairs to the roof, ceiling, and the wall, as well as weatherizing improvements that have reduced his heating bill by 2/3. Remaining interior work will be completed this month. And now, Mr. Josephs, thank you for LISC's support for the Whole Home Repairs Act. Can you please explain what repairs are and what are not covered by existing federal programs?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that question. If I may first also add that there's 5.6% of all homes in rural areas are inadequate. They need these kind of repairs. And it's estimated that the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia estimated repair needs of $149 billion on our housing stock, $57 billion in homes occupied by low-income individuals. So this is exactly the right tool that we need. Existing federal programs at HUD, USDA, DOE, and other, they cover certain things like lead remediation or weatherization. Some sometimes loans for home repairs, but there's really no one-stop shop to get this kind of services. So I think that's the great innovation of the bill.
Yeah, and I just want to drill down on this idea of, I mean, of course, now it's a truly bipartisan solution out of Pennsylvania. And I was lieutenant governor at the time, and I thought that was remarkable. And you have one of my colleagues, again, from an incredibly blue district in Philadelphia, and now found a huge audience from red counties and districts all across Pennsylvania. And that's why I'm hopeful that there might be a path forward. An expert like yourself now fully endorses this.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So we work to ensure the federal program would help both rural and urban areas. Can you speak to the need of this kind of support across these kinds of communities?
Yeah, so I jumped the gun with the stats. In rural communities, there's 1.4 million homes that are classified as inadequate, so they need significant repairs. That's 5.6% of the homes. But also we know there's a lot of aging housing stock in the country. It's at 43 years of age, the median home in 2021 is the oldest it's ever been. In 1991, the median age of a home was 27 years. So this is a problem that's really affecting rural communities. It's in urban communities where you might have higher rates of vacancy, in foreclosures. So it's a tool that can be used in both.
Mr. Chairman, 60 seconds?
Certainly, Senator Fetterman.
Thank you. Ms. Bailey, what's the need for home repair assistance, and how much of our housing stock how we're going to lose, and if we don't have these kind of investments?
Well, thank you, Senator, for that question. We could lose significant amounts of affordable housing without these kind of investments. This is exactly why predatory entities can come into communities and purchase homes, because people don't have the resources they need to fix them. So they make, a reasonable choice to be able to sell these properties, or a family member who inherits the property may decide to sell the property, where if they could have access to some resources to renovate the property and improve the infrastructure of that property, they would keep it. So it can prevent a lot of displacement. It could prevent communities from us losing affordable housing in communities.
Thank you. And thank you for your...
Senator, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank all of you for your testimony. And Mr. Chairman, thank you for holding another hearing on the vital issue of affordable housing. We all know...
Senator Fetterman.
Governor, good to see you again. And I just want to acknowledge you enjoyed a very strong bipartisan vote to bring you on, correct?
Thank you. I did.
And that's a testament to your career and how serious you take this job.
Thank you.
And 25 years ago, I was a graduate student at the Kennedy School, and we were tasked with what's a policy analysis exercise. And they charged us to now to evaluate and to implement a program to privatize Social Security. And I was like, wow, that's kind of crazy. I always thought that Social Security was very sacred. And I turned out to be the only student there I wrote things that I refused to entertain this, to put this in. And I argued that we just have to keep this in that kind of position. And they actually gave me a failing mark. And one of the notes that I remember, it was, Gene Sperling would fire you. You deserve to be. And one of the things we also talked about is that Social Security is then the stability of that. And I believe that it is actually very stable as well, too. And and it also was clear that some kind of actuarial kinds of adjustments or other kind of minor changes could really extend liquidity for decades. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir, it is. I mean, it has been a remarkably simple program in one sense. I don't mean to
So, I mean, this is like this whole kind of, the sky is falling, that it's bankrupt or any kinds of thing like that. It's incredibly stable.
Not going bankrupt. At worst, if Congress were unable to act as you had in 1982, there would be a big depletion event, but it's not going bankrupt. As long as Americans work, it will not go bankrupt.
Yeah. And I agree. So it would just mean, it's so critical to millions and millions of Americans. And it just would be just some small kind of adjustments like that. And then that would tack decades and decades of stability and financial security on that.
Yes, as does a better performing economy and more job creation and rising wages.
And that's where we're at. And I find it's strange. It almost makes me giggle that, we had members of the other side were more concerned about time calls, but not now that their nominee is now discussing about cutting Social Security and things. Now, you wouldn't think that would be advisable to want to cut that or to explore that kind of a conversation? I wouldn't think so.
I haven't, in my travels through these halls, I haven't met one member that wanted to cut Social Security, and I've met members of both parties that was surprised that we already have cut in terms of customer service. But I think that was unwitting. I haven't talked to a single member that said they believe we should cut Social Security.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just like you, all across Pennsylvania. I've never run into a senior or a recipient saying, you know what, we're getting too much, and we really need to think about, we could cut back and tighten our belt. And I just want to acknowledge as well, too, that I would hope that in a bipartisan level, that we want to protect that and strengthen it and address it and not turn it into a political football and just address it in ways and making those kinds of relatively minor kinds of changes to allow Social Security to be secured and fully funded for decades and decades down. And even one of my professor, Alan Simpson, my Republican from Wyoming, mentioned the same thing, that it's often difficult to address that because it's utilized more of as a political football. And is that a same statement too? Would you agree with that?
I was smiling only because I remember Alan Simpson, and he always makes me smile.
Love that guy.
The challenges that face Social Security in terms of longer-term solvency are things that this Congress certainly has the ability to address. And the good news is that this program has the support of 80% of the American people, even in a time of pretty polarized politics. So that's an enormous consensus for extending it.
Yeah, and if 80% of Americans support that, I'm willing to bet that it's 99.999% of people that are recipients that support this program as well too, and millions depend on that. So, and again, thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Well, I'm the chair now. Okay.
Chairman Fetterman.
Yeah, well, this is great, yeah. Anyway, yeah, so, Mayor, congratulations on the Super Bowl, right? Yeah. Yeah, wow.
Thank you.
How many have the Chiefs won?
So we've won 3 since I've
Three?
been mayor. We've won 4 total.
That's fantastic, and I know, Pittsburgh, we have 6, and it's really great.
We are catching up,
We're a
Senator.
little bit, there might be a little bitter here, but yeah. Anyway, well, I want to address what seems to be the elephant in the room. Now, it seems to be people in the room wearing red shirts. And it seems like they're PG-13 versions of perhaps, I don't know. And I guess, and those shirts say they what? The red shirts. Yeah, okay, Fire Mohila. So could any of the experts here on the panel, can we explain why we have people willing to wear shirts? They made them and everything. So I think they probably have an important point. So what would anyone want to address to that?
I'm happy to go first. But after we released our report, the Mohila Papers, we heard from hundreds of borrowers that this report spoke to their lived experiences, that Mohila has more complaints at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau than any other servicer. Mohila has more than 4 in
more than any other.
That's right.
More than anyone. Okay.
That's right. 4 in 10 of Mohila's customers have experienced a servicing failure. Borrowers' experience need to be listened to, and the borrowers are here today to say that Mohila has done them wrong and must be held accountable.
Anyone else would like to weigh in on that? I mean, I think it's remarkable that we have shirts here and everything. There's a lot of seems pretty compelling. I mean, if it has the most complaints of any other agency. Anyway.
Well, if I might, Senator.
Yeah, okay, sure.
So I'd offer here, this is one of the challenges of sort of running the student loan program, right, is that the government requires infrastructure and support. And I think one of the rhetorical issues here is I too, having read that report, would find it deeply disturbing if it were true. The challenge is that it sort of misleads dramatically and makes many false statements. In my opening statement, I covered a lot of that. My written testimony goes into that. I think the real question is, how do we get to a servicing environment that is meeting the expectations? And number one, the government has got to partner with servicers to work together to improve these things. So we've had servicers lead. 7 of them had said to the government, thanks, but no thanks. We don't want to work for you anymore. And continuing that process just means we're churning as opposed to improving. And that's what we need to work on. So I think working together, we can talk about how do we get the Department of Education to partner with servicers to issue guidance in a timely fashion, for the government to give sufficient resources so we can do that outreach. That call hold time and call center hours that were cut, that was at the department's direction because they did not have sufficient resources. That was not a servicer choice. And these are the kind of things we need to work together. So rather than having these sort of hyperbolic reports that really don't say anything substantive, we need to work together on what the actual true nature and architecture of the program is. And I look forward to being able to talk about that further with you.
Yeah. Well, I have anecdotes from my constituents that had that same kind of situation, and it's very frustrating and it's very disappointing as well too. Even if they're looking to pay their loans off, and they make it more difficult, and they increase it without any reason, and I just can't imagine why you would want to make it more difficult or want to work to make it better as well. And now I think my colleague from Georgia made a point that, is it safe to say that every time the president now tries to cancel some debt, and there's an AG from random states to challenge, right? Is that a fact, Reyes?
That's correct. Being from that same state, none of us have asked the attorneys general to intervene. And I believe, as we've heard today,
Yeah, I've never met anyone saying, no, please don't cancel my,
right. Right. There's nobody in Kansas City, nobody in St. Louis or anywhere in the state who's been asking. And I think what we are seeing and what we've seen today is how many people nationally are impacted, but they are looking to get standing to continue to bring these challenges based on the relationship between Mohila and the state of Missouri, but really the harm extends far beyond it. It is purely political, and I think it is purely anti all of the people in red shirts behind me and the millions more who are impacted by it.
Yeah, well, and now since then I'm chairman, I'm going to give myself more time. At any rate, and it's clear that anytime the president makes a move to, give some relief to students, and then there's going to be a lawsuit, and generally some of those kinds of cases may end up being at the Supreme Court. And now it seems to me that the Supreme Court has been really overly political, and it seems to be going to making it more and more difficult to even deliver that kind of aid as well. And we moved much quicker for the Silicon Valley Bank was in collapse. It was like, how much can we do? How much can we do? And I don't think any of these borrowers could have crashed the American economy, one of their loans. But I don't know why there seems to be no outrage for that. But they seem to be that if we're going to deliver some aid for students, in this, I don't really understand that, but it's troubling, and it underscores that, in my opinion, over politicizing the Supreme Court. But regardless, just thank all of you and every you that came to make a point, wearing your shirts, and others that are here as well. And I guess I believe I'm the last speaker as well too. And thank you. Thank you. All right. Well, we're going to a brief recess, and then we have a couple more until my colleague from Massachusetts returns. Okay, then. So I apologize for that comment. Mr. Volsky, strange as it might sound, but I've spent a lot of time in Wyoming, and I know that a town about 4,000 size is meaningful and a big deal in Wyoming. In fact, I was a mayor of a town of roughly that size as well, so I understand that. So let me ask you a question. Do you have leaky roofs in Wyoming?
Yes, I'd say there's leaky roofs across the state.
Do furnaces break down?
Unfortunately, the mechanics also break down in Wyoming, correct?
Oh, yeah. Well, we need to confirm. Mr. Urgot, do roofs leak in Pennsylvania?
Senator, many roofs leak in Pennsylvania, yes.
And furnaces, do they break down?
Often, yeah.
Well, that's and in my community in Western Pennsylvania, they do, and this is the kind of a bill that it can address to those kinds of a thing. And it's also that once a roof is breached, and now the home is allowed to deteriorate and become uninhabitable, and then that becomes abandoned, and that creates all kinds of other costs as well. And it's not very cheap to actually demolish them. And that's a significant issue in my community as right now. For every abandoned home, that becomes a $20,000 to $25,000 IOU to demolish. And that's one less home for someone to live in. And this is the kind of bill that can address that with the kind of flexibilities of that. Have any of you, when you are providing some kind of service, did you ever ask them, who are you voting for, or what are your political beliefs are? No. So it's really agnostic to politics or red or blue counties. It's just something for all of us, for Americans, that they have these kinds of very common issues, and it allows them that typically skew more elderly, and they just want to remain in dignity and this kind of security of living in their home. Is that accurate? Seems pretty reasonable as well. And also, when you often deal with the government, things can be less inefficient then. But this is the kind of flexibility that allows those things to direct directly as well. Is that accurate? Flexibility can be helpful in that, right? And it addressed these very specific kinds of a thing. And it is undeniable that making someone's bathroom more comfortable or usable means, or bars and things, that's helpful. But to that point earlier, it's like you can't live with a better bathroom if you can't heat your house, or it's leaking and it makes it there. So this really is that. And this also allows that if you are forced to leave your home, that cannot preserve any kind of wealth or anything as well. So this undermines a lot of different things as well. And this was born in a senator from Pennsylvania in a very, very blue liberal, and that was embraced by a very, very conservative members of my former chamber in Pennsylvania. And now, as politics become more and more, divisive and everything, it's encouraging to have something like this. We can come together and acknowledge that we want to serve everyone, and allows them to provide elderly to live in dignity, and to preserve our housing stock, and remind everybody that, as what my colleague from Montana pointed out, that we need kind of solutions like that. So I want to thank all of you on what that your works do and how important that is. Small town where I live in right now, regardless of where in this nation, this is the kind of bill that can address that and allow people to live in dignity and to preserve our housing stock in a nation that is now faced with a significant housing crisis. So I want to thank you for coming here and joining us today. And I turn back to our chairwoman.
Thank you so much, Senator Fetterman, and thanks for your work on this legislation.
Senator Fetterman, welcome. Good to see you. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hi. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to an expert on all of this. And I'm in Pennsylvania, and some people across the nation really doesn't know what a brownfield is. And a brownfield, would you like to give an exact definition?
Yes, these brownfields are sites that have been contaminated, that are qualified for programs where we can clean these brownfields up, whether they're abandoned warehouses or gas stations that typically are blights in our communities, and we can turn them into economic engines.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And sometimes they can be smaller that you were referencing, or they can be really large. They can be, a couple hundred acres and everything. And I'm in Western Pennsylvania, and I literally live and I'm surrounded by brownfields. And at one point last century, that was the engine that really helped shape American society and was about half of the world's steel output. And now they were abandoned and they were left really kind of to hold the bag. And the investments, the proactive kinds of investments on these brownfields have now allowed struggled communities to emerge from bankruptcy. And I literally live next door to one, the Cary Furnace site as well. And it's magnificent. And now it's actually part of it now is going to be a national historic site of steel. It's the last standing example of that kind of a blast furnace. And those are the kind of investments that help the communities that created so much of an investment and output for the history of our nation. And that's one of my priorities here as Pennsylvania senators, to continue that, because there's more and more sites like that in Allegheny County, of where I live. But Pennsylvania, it's a story across all of it. And you run a very large agency, and I'm not going to throw a lot at you. I just hope the one thing to take away from that is just how critical brownfield funding for Pennsylvania absolutely is. It is a lifeline for communities like Duquesne, like Braddock, like Rankin, like Swissvale, like West Homestead, Munhall, all these. And now, without those kind of investments, those fallow sites would not have had anything done for 30, 40, 50 years. Yeah. And it has really created an amazing impact on that. So if you have 5 minutes, that's an opportunity to talk to an expert like yourself. Is that really means everything. And it's almost kind of somewhat related to my colleague from Alaska, that it's land that has a lot of great valuable, but it needs a lot of remediation as well. And those invest in forgotten or communities that were left behind. And this really is very, very critical. And if there's anything I can do to be more of a more effective advocate for that, I really am here. I would lend any feedback on that. And I want to thank your agency's investments to do that. And it's not just Pennsylvania. There's a lot of other deindustrializing some states that we all need those kind of so I'd like to, if you have any observations, I see the time to yourself, and I thank your administration's work on all of it.
No, I appreciate your laser focus on this, and we appreciate the resources that we receive from the bipartisan infrastructure law to supercharge this. I think we've awarded over $250 million towards our brownfields program. That's the largest in the EPA's history. And, just a great example is in Pittsburgh, we work with the state, vacant property, 2 gas stations that we converted into affordable senior living with cafes and the like. We see this as a huge opportunity not to leave any communities behind. So we'll continue to work with your staff to be sure that we're prioritizing these investments. But there's a win-win opportunity there, as you've articulated.
Yeah, and I have a little about 30 seconds left, and I would just more, and more, and thank you for those kind of investments. I just please, as a former mayor of one of those small communities, I cannot possibly express how critical those investments are to allow these communities to move forward, because without those kind of help, they would continue to deteriorate and certainly not ever be able to prosper and come into a new phase. Yeah. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Yeah. Senator Fetterman, thanks so much for joining. I think your perspective, I know my perspective as a former governor, informs me in the work that I do every day, and I'm sure your experience as a former mayor and, as, if I'm not mistaken, a lieutenant governor as well, and husband, father, all of that helps inform us for the work that we do.
Fetterman's recognized from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I would like to thank my colleague from Connecticut for allowing to do this. Yes, hi. Banks seem to really, they love fees like that, right? I didn't. I think it's helpful if something happens to you to really understand what a lot of other American consumers face that kinds of a thing. I'd say about 18, probably a couple years ago, I was at a coffee place and I bought one. And then everything went through. I didn't think anything of it. And then I had a notice that I overdraft my account. So that was a $40 cup of coffee. And then I wasn't at Blue Bottle, but at any rate, so is it pretty it seems kind of crazy that you would allow your account to be charged for, $35 over a cup of coffee. And of course, I didn't really appreciate it. So in whose interest was that, would you think? And anyone, what do you thought about
it? So it's in the interest of institutions that want to pad their profits with huge exorbitant fees. I think we shouldn't forget that during the time when you were experiencing your not Blue Bottle coffee overdraft, that many institutions were using high to low check reordering to actually trigger additional overdrafts.
Yeah, well, and I that's what I thought, and then I called up my bank, and I'm like, well, hey, that's kind of crazy, and they're like, well, actually, sir, we allowed this transaction to occur, and you were able to get on with your day, and they actually they justify that by saying, well, that's a service that we provided that you were allowed to get your coffee and get on with your day, and then now it become very clear that these kinds of fees are a profit center. Is that accurate too?
Oh, absolutely. The data from call reports reveals that the amount of fees coming in off of transaction accounts, in some cases can be 20, 30, 40% equivalent to the net income of that financial institution. Those are almost overdraft stores.
Yeah. And it's pure profit too. I mean, it's no service, anything other than, it's just being nickel and dimed. I personally don't enjoy that, being nickel and dimed. Are any of you in the panel, do you enjoy being nickel and dimed anywhere you go?
No, sir.
No? Anyone? So, but now what once was something that was a penalty now has become part of their mission, is like to that. And then this happened just last week in my apartment. The DC rental market is kind of rough, and I pay $2,000 a month for 500 squares. And then I left my key on the counter, and then I approached the front desk, and I'm like, could you please let me in so I can get my key? And they're like, well, absolutely. And then they pulled out a form that said, well, that's $50. I'm like, oh, no, I don't need a new key. Could you just let me in? And they're like, well, that doesn't matter. That's $50. And I'm like, $50 to let me in? And then I really couldn't believe that someone would charge $50 just to open up to just get your key. And would you agree that that's kind of a junk fee for housing rentals?
Well, yes, absolutely. That's a junk fee. I feel bad for the person at the desk who had to follow the corporate policy that requires them to charge that fee.
Well, yeah, of course, it's not personal against the worker, but the fact that they institutionalized this idea that we're gonna be $50 for letting you to just get your key there, and that's just pure profit, and that becomes that too. And metaphorically, and I know I'm running out of time, but I think that's the same kind of in a government where you cannot count or create like parking tickets and speeding tickets as revenue. That should be about for public service or to protect a situation. And it's in my opinion, it's just gone crazy. And now when billions and billions of dollars now, those kinds of nickel and diming now is part of their business strategy. But thank you for joining me, and my time is off. So.
Thanks, Senator Fetterman. Senator Van Hollen of Maryland is recognized.